In the headlines, the two Koreas failed to make a breakthrough in their high-level military talks, a first in 7 years. But Seoul tries to keep the dialogue going, offering a date for the already scheduled high-level talks. The Bank of Korea cuts the key rate by 25 basis points and trims its growth outlook for this year and the next. And Hong Kong police arrest 45 pro-democracy protesters in an effort to stop demonstrators from reoccupying a major road outside of the government headquarters.
Welcome to the program. You're watching Primetime News live from Seoul. I'm Sean Lim.
And I'm Kang Chery. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. High-level military brass from South and North Korea held talks today for the first time in 7 years.
Seoul's defense ministry confirms the secretive meeting took place, but added that no major breakthroughs were made. Our Hwang Sung-hee has more on where we go from here.
The two Koreas held a secretive round of military talks on Wednesday in attempts to ease tensions in their border regions. Seoul's defense ministry said general-level officers met at the truce village of Panmunjom after Pyongyang proposed the meeting last week. North Korea demanded 3 things: that South Korean vessels steer clear of the maritime border, that the South Korean government keep activists from flying anti-Pyongyang leaflets across the border, and that the media stop slandering the North Korean leadership. In response, South Korea said Pyongyang must respect their de facto maritime border in the West Sea, and that the government cannot stop the spread of the leaflets and restrict the media since South Korea is a liberal, democratic society. Last week, South and North Korean patrol boats exchanged fire after a North Korean vessel crossed the de facto maritime border in the West Sea. 3 days later, the two Koreas exchanged gunfire across their shared border after the North fired at South Korean balloons carrying anti-Pyongyang leaflets. The defense ministry said Wednesday's meeting was kept secret due to escalating military tensions following the recent clashes. But no concrete agreement was reached, with no date set for their next meeting. Meanwhile, the Unification Ministry confirmed that it proposed to the North on Monday the date for their planned second round of high-level talks. The ministry said South Korea offered to meet on October 30th at Panmunjom, but is still waiting for a response from the North. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
President Park Geun-hye, who is currently in Italy for the biennial Asia-Europe meeting, met with Korean and Italian business leaders ahead of the summit and talked about bolstering cooperation between the two countries. Choi Yoo-sun has more.
Despite being 2 of the world's top 10 trading nations, Korea and Italy's trade volume stood at $8.5 billion last year. That makes Italy Korea's 29th trading partner and Korea Italy's 26th. Highlighting Seoul and Rome's 130 years of diplomatic relations and economic similarities, President Park, meeting with Korean and Italian business leaders in Milan, said there still remains great potential for the two sides to cooperate economically. In particular, she talked about Italy's family-owned businesses passed down from one generation to the next that make up more than 80% of the country's GDP. The Korean president asked Italian businesses to share their know-how to longevity with Korea's small and mid-sized firms. Touting Italy's strength in basic sciences and new energy, President Park said combined with Korea's manufacturing technology and IT, the two sides could co-produce innovative products at the center of a new growth engine. This goes in line with President Park's creative economy of converging IT with culture and other sectors. The president later met with Korean residents in Italy and acknowledged their achievements, especially in the cultural arts and fashion, would help better bridge the two sides. She also asked them to seek Italian support for Seoul's efforts to bring the two Koreas together and prepare for the costly process of unification. On Thursday, President Park will make her debut at the ASEM with Eurasia Initiative high on her agenda. And she will largely focus on North Korean issues during talks with Chinese Premier Li Keqiang on the sidelines of the summit. Choi Yoo-sun, Arirang News, Milan.
Strained bilateral relations between South Korea and Japan may be heading for a new low, moving in the opposite direction of Korea's request that Japan acknowledge its wartime atrocities. Tokyo will now go on a global campaign to deny any wrongdoing when it comes to its sexual enslavement of women during World War II. Kim Min-ji has more on Japan's new diplomatic choice.
The frosty ties between Korea and Japan are far from thawing. The Japanese government says it will actively promote that Japan has committed no sins when it comes to forcing women to serve as sex slaves during World War II. The statement made at a cabinet meeting on Tuesday is in response to a lawmaker's question about the Asahi Shimbun newspaper's decision in early August to retract what it called erroneous articles published in the 80s and 90s about the sexual slavery issue. According to the statement, Japan will strengthen foreign communications so that its stance and handling of affairs receives a fair assessment by the international community. The move goes against Korea's demand that Japan acknowledge and show sincerity about its historical wrongdoings, particularly the sexual enslavement of women. The Seoul government also deplored on Wednesday the Japanese Foreign Minister Kishida Fumio a day earlier repeated Tokyo's claim to Korea's easternmost Dokdo Island, despite Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's administration's pledge to take steps to improve bilateral ties. Adding fuel to the fire, a top cabinet official who has spearheaded efforts to deny Japan's wartime sexual enslavement says she will visit a controversial war shrine that honors A-class war criminals.
When time allows, I'll visit the Yasukuni Shrine.
Japan's chief cabinet secretary Yoshida Suga said there's nothing wrong with paying respect to those who lost their lives while fighting for the country. With Korea and Japan on diverging paths, it seems highly unlikely that long-delayed bilateral summit talks will be arranged anytime soon. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
China has also lashed out at Japan over a planned visit by its officials to the controversial Yasukuni War Shrine. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Hong Lei said Wednesday that China-Japan relations will only move forward when Japan fully reflects on its past aggressions and breaks from militarism. Hong also urged Japan to honor its commitments to right historical wrongs through concrete actions in order to gain trust from Asian nations. His comments come after Japanese officials, including top cabinet member Sanae Takaichi, said visits to the shrine honoring Class A war criminals would be made during an autumn festival that begins Friday.
Your gateway to the day's biggest stories in Korea and around the world. Breaking news, the hottest interviews, and a whole lot more. Join Arirang Sean Lim and Kang Chery from the heart of Seoul.
News begins now.
Primetime news, weeknights, live at 10 on Arirang TV.
Korea's central bank has cut its key rate to a record low of 2% to give a much-needed boost to this flagging economy. And the central bank's concerns over the economy was reflected in its new growth forecast for this year, which was cut to a mid-3% level. Our Hwang Sung-hee has more.
Lowering growth forecast for the economy, the Bank of Korea on Wednesday cut its key interest rate by 1/4 of a percentage point to 2%. It's the second rate cut in just 3 months and marks a drop to the record low only matched at the height of the global financial crisis in 2009. BOK Governor Lee Ju-yeol said the rate cut was necessary as economic sentiment remains sluggish at home, while inflation stays lower than expected.
The Monetary Policy Committee believes the 2 rate cuts, including the one in August, should help the domestic economy recover its growth momentum.
In the face of the feeble pace of recovery, the central bank cut its new growth forecast for this year to 3.5% from an earlier projection of 3.8%. Although the new growth outlook for next year was trimmed by a mere 0.1 percentage point, the central bank said that does not mean the economy is stably back on a normal track.
We expect the Korean economy to grow nearly 4% in 2015, but the growth will mainly come from the government's expansionary policy.
The rate cut this month, however, stokes concerns. The country's household debt that already stands at around $950 billion could spiral out of control. Experts said that the domestic economy could face massive capital outflows with the historically low key rate in place while the U.S. Federal Reserve is tightening its monetary policy. Acknowledging such concerns, the governor said the central bank will closely monitor the risks stemming from the rate cut. He said although the recent rate cuts will help prop up growth, structural changes are critical for the longer-term health of the economy. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
And do note that the Bank of Korea has trimmed inflation forecast for this year and the next as well. And here's a data point that could support that downgrade. Korea's import prices fell for the 7th straight month last month on weakening oil prices. The Bank of Korea says the import price index stood at 93 in September, the lowest level in 5.5 years. The central bank explained the local currency weakened against the greenback by 0.8% in September on month, but the price of Dubai crude shed more than 5%, dragging overall import prices down.
And another economic indicator out today, Korea's unemployment rate inched down in September, but the pace of job creation slowed to a 3-month low. Statistics Korea says the jobless rate stood at 3.2% last month, edging down 0.1 percentage point from the month before. Some 450,000 new jobs were created in September, up around 2% on year, bringing Korea's employment rate to 61%. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg and his 40-member delegation spent the second day of its trip to Korea in Suwon, south of Seoul. Samsung Electronics says Facebook board members, including COO Sheryl Sandberg, stopped by at Samsung's key complex called Samsung Digital City in Suwon. Prior to that, on Tuesday, Zuckerberg met with Samsung Electronics Vice Chairman Lee Jae-yong for 2 hours over dinner. There are no official details on yesterday's meeting, but industry watchers say they may have exchanged ideas on possible production of Facebook smartphones and wearable virtual reality devices. And speaking of wearable technology, it's often touted as the next big thing, but for these wearable gadgets to really take off, their batteries need to last and be wearable as well. Our Ji Myung-gil reports on some of the Korean manufacturers working on new types of batteries that bend, flex, and even roll.
Samsung SDI has developed the world's first bendable and rollable batteries that can be integrated into smart wristband watches.
We conducted thousands of bending tests, and there was no performance degradation in the charging capacity of the batteries.
Samsung SDI also unveiled PIN batteries that are identical in size to a drug capsule at just 3.6 millimeters in diameter. They can be used in a variety of wearable devices that require ultra-small batteries. Not to be outdone, LG Chem introduced cable batteries, which can be used to light up OLED monitors and small display panels. They can be bent and twisted and are also waterproof.
Cable batteries are suitable for powering wearable devices such as Bluetooth earphones, headphones, and can even be applied to various clothing materials.
Both companies are also focusing on large-sized batteries which can be used in electric vehicles. They say mass production on those will begin in the next few years. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
Obesity is a serious problem throughout much of the world, and unfortunately, Korea's overall obesity rate, especially among young boys, is increasing at a worrying pace. It's now surpassing the OECD average. Son Jung-in reports.
8-year-old Son Soo-min is heavier than most of his classmates. After a body checkup, his parents were told he has a body fat ratio twice the average for a boy his age. Like many kids in Korea, Soo-min likes to tuck into calorie and carbohydrate-rich food like white rice, red meat, and fast food, and doesn't get enough exercise.
I like snacks and drinks. I like soda like Coke.
His mother wasn't aware of the consequences and just gave him whatever he asked for.
I heard people say that fat children usually eat up being taller as adults.
The problem has worsened in recent years. In Korea, 1 in 4 boys aged 5 to 17 are obese, which is slightly higher than the OECD average. What's more concerning is that well over half of those boys remain obese into adulthood and are at higher risk of becoming morbidly obese. Obesity can lead to a host of other health issues like diabetes, high blood pressure, and it can also increase the chance of cerebrovascular disease at a young age.
Obesity is known to cause cancer, including colorectal cancer, breast cancer, as well as asthma, fatty liver, and other liver disorders.
It also incurs great social costs in terms of medical expenses and loss of production. According to recent data, the socioeconomic cost stemming from child obesity in Korea amounts to $1.3 billion each year. Child and teenage obesity not only affects the individual, but their family, school, and the community as a whole. Experts advise parents to create a friendly but firm atmosphere for their children and encourage them to exercise and eat fresh fruit and vegetables to maintain a healthier lifestyle. 손정인, 아리랑 뉴스.
Police in Hong Kong have continued to clash with the protesters for the second straight day today, resulting in the worst violence since these pro-democracy rallies erupted in the city more than 2 weeks ago.
With more, we turn to Paul Yee at the News Center. Paul, tensions have spiked in the wake of this police crackdown. How did events play out between the two sides today?
Well, the violent confrontations reignited early this morning as the police stepped up their offensive to clear the city's roads that have been blocked by activists for over 2 weeks now. Officials reportedly used pepper spray and batons to disperse the crowds and arrested at least 45 people overnight. In a press briefing on Wednesday, authorities said some protesters were to blame for the escalation.
Regrettably, radical protesters refused to comply. They put up a fierce struggle and advanced towards the police line. They advanced forward in an aggressive manner, kicked our officers, attacked them with umbrellas, and snatched new barriers. Even with their arms raised, this could hardly be considered a peaceful protest.
Activists and Hong Kong lawmakers are calling for an investigation into an alleged case of police brutality after a video was released of 6 officers beating an unarmed protesters during the clash. Demonstrators are continuing to demand that Hong Kong have the freedom to pick its own chief executive in 2017, a move the incumbent chief says has almost a zero chance of happening. And shifting to the Ebola crisis, a top UN official has warned the world is losing the fight against the deadly virus as it continues to spread across West Africa. Addressing the Security Council on Tuesday, Anthony Banbury, the head of the UN's Ebola response mission, said more medical staff and supplies were urgently needed in the affected countries. He warned that as long as there is a single case of Ebola, the virus will be a threat to all countries and people.
Many more people will die. But if we do not get ahead of the crisis, if we do not reach our targets, and the number of people with Ebola rises dramatically, as some have predicted, the plan we have is not scalable. We either stop Ebola now, or we face an entirely unprecedented situation for which we do not have a plan.
Meanwhile, health authorities in the U.S. state of Texas have confirmed that a second healthcare worker has tested positive for Ebola. The World Health Organization says if the viral outbreak continues on its current course, some 10,000 new cases per week are expected to arise by the end of this year. And staying in the U.S., a key meeting of defense chiefs from over 20 nations has wrapped up in Washington to address the growing threat of Islamic State militants. Speaking on Tuesday, U.S. President Obama said he is very concerned about the assault on the Syrian town of Kobani, as well as the Iraqi province of Anbar. Obama warned the coalition it would take a long-term campaign to destroy the extremist group and that the journey would involve progress and setbacks.
Our nations agree that ISIL poses a significant threat to the people of Iraq and Syria. It poses a threat to surrounding countries. And because of the numbers of foreign fighters that are being attracted and the chaos that ISIL was creating in the region. Ultimately, it will pose a threat beyond the Middle East, including to the United States, Europe.
The U.S.-led coalition had conducted 21 aerial attacks on IS targets near Kobani over the past 2 days in support of Kurdish forces defending the town. The Pentagon said the bombings appear to have slowed the insurgents, but cautioned that the situation remained fluid. And finally, the global tech giant Intel has beat market expectations in its latest earnings call on the back of recovering sales in the traditional PC market. The company reported $15 billion of revenue for the third quarter. However, tablets and smartphones only accounted for $1 million of that total. After years of struggling to break into the mobile space, the top chip maker says it plans to start providing generous subsidies for tablet manufacturers.
I think one of the things that we could probably learn from our Chinese partners is that, maybe it's the flexibility perhaps and the speed, at which they address the market, I think this is something that, it's not that it's not within our DNA, but, to work with accomplished players like this in a market that has already, achieved some success.
Market watchers are wary of the latest venture after Intel's previous joint projects with Asus and Nokia failed to gain any ground. And that wraps up our look at international stories making headlines around the world. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
Hello and welcome. I'm Stephen Che with Wednesday's Sports Update. We start things off with baseball in the KBO. We're at the home stretch of the regular season, but the playoff spots aren't yet locked up. And that brings us to the big matchup between the first place Samsung Lions and fourth place LG Twins. Now both need to win to defend their spots. Samsung has Yoon Sung-hwan, LG, Corey Riordan. Now Samsung scores first as Park Han-hee singles and Chae Tae-in doubles. It's 3-0 Lions. Now LG finally gets one in the sixth as Lee Byung-gyu gets the runner in. Then another in the seventh by Brad Snyder. And that's all before a wild pitch sees the runner come home. It ties it up at 3-3. But in the eighth, Michael Navarro saves the day with a solo homer, and Samsung wins 5-3. And looking at the other games, Tucson beats SK 6-3 and the Nexon edges Lotte 7-6. And with that, Samsung clinches first place, Nexon second, and NC third. Meanwhile, LG maintains its cushion over SK. And over to the MLB. A rainout the day before led to a doubleheader of the National and American League Championship Series Game 3s. First up in the NLCS, the San Francisco Giants took the series lead, beating the St. Louis Cardinals 5-4 in the 10th inning after a throwing error by the Cardinals reliever. Meanwhile, Kansas City is threatening a sweep of the AL pennant as its pitchers retired Baltimore Orioles' final 16 batters in the 2-1 win. Now both Game 4s continue on Wednesday in the U.S. or Thursday morning in Korea. And back to live games, we head to the KBL. Over on the hard court in Changwon, the LG Sakers hosted the KT Sonic Boom. And it's a back-and-forth affair, and it goes to halftime with both LG sophomore star Kim Jong-gyu and KT first-year man Marcus Lewis dropping 12 points. Now LG pulls ahead by the fourth behind Kim, but in the final period, KT sees everything clicking together with Yoon Yeok-won putting in 8 of his 14 points there, and KT gets the win from LG 84-79. Meanwhile, the Samsung Thunders get the overtime win over Anyang KGC 92-90. And finally, we head to Bermuda for the PGA Grand Slam of Golf, an off-season tournament played by the season's major winners. Now Masters winner Bubba Watson, U.S. Open champ Martin Kaymer, and the Open and PGA Championships titleist Rory McIlroy was joined by past champion and invitee Jim Furyk to make up the elite foursome. And it was Kaymer who was the most consistent at Port Royal, shooting 6 under par on the first day of the 2-day tournament. Watson was next at 4 under, then McIlroy at 2 under, and Furyk last at 1 over par. And that's all I have for now. Stay tuned for your weather up next. Have a great evening.
Happy Wednesday, everyone. I'm Kim Bo-kyung with the weather updates. It was another chilly day here in Korea with the season's first frost reported in Daewalyeong. Otherwise, showers are in store tomorrow. The central regions, including Seoul, are looking at 5 to 20 millimeters, and Jeollabuk-do and Gyeongsangbuk-do provinces about 5 millimeters. Currently, we are under fairly clear skies due to a high-pressure system from China, but that system will move out overnight, leading to some rainfall. Keep in mind that showers could be accompanied by stormy conditions. Also, strong winds are expected for areas along the west coast. Enjoy the autumn conditions while you can, because another round of showers awaits us next week. On to the readings. Seoul and Gwangju reached 20, Busan 23. On to other regions. Daejeon hits 20, Jeju peaks at 21, Dokdo 18, Mangkumgang 7. That'll do it for now. Tune in for more updates after midnight. See you then.
And that's Primetime News on this Wednesday. I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for watching.
And I'm Kang Chery. Enjoy your evening. We'll see you soon.